Hello, welcome to yesterday's Airlines. jcwings have just very recently announced their August releases, though none of them will obviously appear in August, as it is the last day of August anyway, but I get the feeling they probably won't appear for a couple of months, as is usual with JC. Nonetheless, as they've announced them, obviously I'm back to talk through the releases, see what I think about those, and perhaps give you a little bit of insight into the molds that are being used and whether they've been made before, and so on and so forth. Help you to perhaps make a decision about whether you think you might buy them or not, or at least just entertain you a little bit. You don't obviously have to do what I say. Nonetheless, we've got another 14 releases from JC this month to discuss, so we will get to that very shortly. A couple of admin points beforehand. Firstly, I must apologise because I realised that the sound on some of these earlier videos has sucked a little bit, and I am sorry for that. Didn't realise it was quite as bad as it was, and I think I've fixed the issue now, so hopefully the sound is a lot better on these videos. And secondly, my usual, subscribe to the channel, people. Subscribe, because I do this kind of thing quite a bit for my sins, and obviously I produce plenty of other material about 400 scale, both at Instagram at YesToAirlines and at my Facebook page at YesToAirlines too, and obviously at YesterdayAirlines.com, the website, which is where it all began and is still the hub of most of what I do. So thank you very much for anyone who reads my material and subscribes to the channel. Let's get on and check out what JC have got in store for us this month. So last month for JC was a little bit meh, really. I think looking at what I did last month, there are a couple of supersonics, a few high flyers, and a lot of workhorse. And to be honest, I get the feeling this month is going to be quite similar, partly because the release set is quite similar, as you will see. So what we'll do is the usual run through via the manufacturer of the aircraft type and see where we think these things are going to fall out on the scale from supersonic to scrap metal. And I'm going to begin with an Embraer, even though it doesn't begin at the beginning of the alphabet. It is on its own, and there's just one this month, and you don't get too many Embraer releases anyway. This one is an Embraer 170 in the colours of J-Air, JA220J. And obviously, I should be making the gag about the fact that it's not really in the colours of J-Air because they don't have any colours. It's in the Japan Airlines all white, couldn't be bothered to think about it scheme, but it's got the crane on the tail, so everyone likes it. J-Air scheme is no more inspirational than its parent companies, but at the same time, it's nice to get some Embraer 170s, and you don't get too many of these in 400 scale. And looking at what's been made previously, if you look at Embraer 170s across the board, there are only 19, and surprisingly, probably at least half of those, in fact over half I think, have been made by Herpa, which is really unusual because Herpa are usually so incredibly lazy in 400 scale. Nonetheless, JC's made a couple, but mainly, as you'd expect, falling into, in fact totally falling into the Asian market. We've had two Fuji Dream Airlines releases, and now we've got this J-Air one. So they've only made three. Gemini's made a selection of other ones, of course, mainly Americans, which, in fact, all Americans again. You know, usual carriers, Delta Connection, USA Airways Express, so on and so forth. So anyway, I quite like the mould. I quite like these little Embraer moulds. They're not perfect by any means, and the engines do tend to look like they're about to drag along the ground sometimes too. They're not always perfect, but it's not bad, and you don't get many of them, so that makes it a bit more interesting from my perspective. It's obviously not one I'm going to buy because it's way outside my collection criteria. If it had been an E170 and a Chinese airline, I'd have been interested, though I'm not sure there are any Chinese airlines operating the type, thinking about it. But nonetheless, that would have made it certainly not more interesting for me. I'm not going to be getting this version. It is one of the releases which is going to be out reasonably soon because they've got a photograph of the actual thing and it looks good. So for me, this one, it's more interesting than the livery suggests because at least it's a type that doesn't get made very much. It's a type no one else is going to make, and it's a nice little mold anyway. So I'm going to slip this one up into high flyer. Okay, now we're going to move off into the Airbus products, and this is where the deja vu really begins to set in, because this version of a Lufthansa A340 in the Star Alliance colours, in this case it's DAIFA, is incredibly reminiscent of a previous release they made not very long ago for DAIGN. In fact, it was 2020. They obviously made these two models exactly the same time. The liveries are exactly the same, except oddly this one does not have Lufthansa written on it. It's just got the Star Alliance scheme, doesn't have the airline title, whereas the previous one did. So otherwise they're exactly the same. Not really sure why anyone would be interested in buying this one if they had the other one. And, you know, if you like Star Alliance schemes, why didn't you get the other one? Probably because you might have got the Phoenix version, actually, looking at it, which is around on a mould that I slightly prefer. AeroClassics has also made a Star Alliance version, but it's not quite as recent, and it's a slightly different scheme, I think. But nonetheless, this version, I'm sure it'll be okay. The JC A340-300 is a nice mould. It's not as nice as the Panda version, or probably the Phoenix version either, but it's still decent enough, and I would buy it if I was interested in buying models that they'd already released previously, or collected Lufthansa, obviously. So, yeah, it's not exciting, is it? It's going to be slap bang in the workhorse. I'm sure you guys have seen this coming already. When you release pretty much the same aircraft that you already released not that long ago, I'm not going to be giving it a score better than the workhorse. And next up is another A330. This one has not been released before, so this one doesn't have a sense of deja vu. This is Condor. It's DAIYC. It's wearing... yeah, I'm not sure how to describe it. It's wearing effectively the new scheme, but only on the tail. So it's only got the tail colours of the new scheme, and the tail colours are kind of a beige, sandy colour, which I guess represents kind of what the scheme kind of looks like when you've got a complete white fuselage without the stripes there. I'm not an enormous fan of the Condor newly scheme anyway, but at least it's colourful and different. When you've still got a white fuselage and just got the colours on the tail, then it's not as exciting. Nobody else has made it though, or announced it, so this one is pretty unique for JC. Their A330 mould is, yeah, it's okay. Just like their A340 really, but somehow the A340s always look slightly better. Can't get excited about the scheme though. Workhorse again. And the last A330 this month is an A330-900, and once again, got the deja vu feeling, because even though this is for a beautiful scheme, that of AirCalin, and the reg is FONET, jcwings have made this exact same model in 2019, just registered FONEO. So effectively it is the same in every way, just with a different reg. And looking at the box, like many JC releases nowadays, it told you this when they made the original version, that they were going to make the next version as well. JC really have a pattern nowadays of basically splitting their releases. So they make one batch of models with just a very minor change, like the Rego, and then they release one in 1 year, and then they wait a couple of years to release the second one. And you know they obviously produced it exactly at the same time, because that's the way that you save money, hey? But they just delay it and release two apart. And I guess that's not bad, because it gives people the chance to get models they wouldn't have got previously if they missed them, or if they're a new collector, or whatever. But it isn't exciting. And even though I love the mould and the scheme is awesome, it's workhorse again, because you could probably still find the old release, to be honest. And this one's the same. So far, of the 4 releases I've looked at, 2 of them are basically rinse and repeats, and this pattern continues into the Boeing aircraft as well, which is good if you missed out on the original releases, but otherwise isn't particularly interesting or exciting. And the next release up is an Aer Lingus 737-500 EICDE. Once again, it's exactly the same as the recent release EICDA, which I actually bought and was a really nice little release, and came out, I think it may have even come out this year. It wasn't very long ago at all that it actually got to market. What can I say? I like their 77500 mould. It's not the newest mould in the world, but it does the job nicely. Lingus Classic Scheme's great. But I already got it. Bought it. And everyone else probably has too. So, you know, do we need another one just to keep JC sweet in terms of being able to slip out similar but not the same models? And I guess maybe there's somebody out there who really does fleet collect every Aer Lingus reg. Can't be many of those people, surely. So, yeah, it's another workhorse model. You know, there's not much to say about these. They're just re-releases of things that have already been done before. Can't get too excited by that. Okay. Moving on to another 737, and this one once again is almost a re-release. This one's LOT. It's a 737 MAX 8 SP LVD. There was SP LVF released. It may have even been only last month or the month before. I can't quite recall. But this one is different in the sense that at least it's wearing a new scheme. It is wearing the Polish independence scheme, which is actually a really nice scheme with a big waving white and red flag banner along the fuselage with the map of Poland on the front fuselage there. Looks really cool, and if you've got the first lot MAX 8, then I don't see why you wouldn't want to get this one too, because it's an exciting and interesting scheme, and good that they're releasing it. I've already waxed lyrical about my liking for the JC Max, though I have noticed that some of the recent releases have had slightly too pointy a nose, so someone's over polishing things there in the factory. But if the nose is as it ought to be, then it's a kick-ass mould, and this is a lovely scheme. So this one's going up there in a high flyer. This one's definitely not a workhorse. Leaving the 737s, and we are off into jumbo territory. And the first model is, yet again, a re-release, you guessed it. It is an American Airlines 747 SP. This time it's N602 AA. Only a few months ago, it was N601 AA. Yeah. I looked at the pictures of the previous release, and actually in isolation, it kind of looks okay. You think, oh wow, look, that's a beautiful silvery fuselage, and the model looks good. And if there was no competition out there in the world of 400 scale, then you'd probably be going buying this and being quite happy about it. But that just isn't the case. There is competition. Obviously, there's good competition. There's competition from ngmodels, who have gone to the trouble of making a new 747 SP Mold 1 that is excellent. Possibly the best 747 that's ever been made in the scale. Certainly up there with the top molds anyway. Whereas this JC 747 SP is the old Gemini mold that dates from back when dinosaurs walked the earth. It's not appalling, but it is the same mold, just sexed up slightly with aerials and some new rolling gear. It is not a will beater by anyone's estimation, surely, though I know some people pretend there is comparisons that can be made that are favourable. They are lying. There are not. This one is a mould which just doesn't have the right shape across a good chunk of it. The nose isn't quite the right shape, and you could argue that's the case with the NG2, but this is different levels of bad. Going up to the cockpit's wrong, the hump isn't as good. It's got a cradle fit mould. The engine's pylons still have that incredibly old kind of square attachment to the wings that comes from these very first generation Gemini moulds, which were great in their day and still are passable, but are not 2022 level of production. So even though this model is going to look good from a distance, if you care about getting the best 400 scale models, then you should be looking to get the best 400 scale models. And this is not going to be one of the best 400 scale models because it has already been made much better by ngmodels on their better 747 SP. So even though this will be okay, I'm not going to give it workhorse. I refuse this time. And I did think about maybe this is just workhorse, I could be workhorse, but I'm not going to. Especially because it does seem like JC have only just started producing SPs because NG have started producing SPs. And you can say competition is good, but really all they're doing is rehashing this old mold and throwing it out there as a spoiler. I don't like it. Don't like the mold. Don't really like the behaviour too much. Gas guzzler. This one's going in. Gas guzzler. Sorry, JC, but it's just can't compete. It's not a competing mold. Next up, though, is a competing mold. And this time we've got the new 747-400 mold, which everyone knows is pretty decent. Yeah, it could do with slightly longer legs on it. But the undercarriage is what it is, and JC don't listen to feedback. So they haven't changed it. And it's okay. It's still a really nice mold. And this time around we've got Thai cargo. There have been a bucket load of Thai releases recently. There's obviously someone in Thailand throwing some cash jcwings way. Hey, why not? So they've made the passenger version of this, they've made the Star Alliance version of this, they've made the classic colours version of this, and they've now made the Thai cargo version of this, all within the last year or two. This is going to be really nice. It has been made before. It's been made by Phoenix on that god-awful, horrible thing that they pretend is a 747. It's also been made by jcwings before, actually, on their old Gemini mold. It has been made also by wittywings in the past as well, I believe, which is probably the best of those previous efforts. But this is going to be probably the best version, and they're also releasing a flaps down version of it. So this one should be pretty kick-ass, and I'm going to put this one up into high flyer. The last 747 in the release set this month is a more unique model, and this one is one of the ones which isn't going to be out anytime soon. It's just got a picture of the actual aeroplane and not a picture of the release. You know what JC are about. They release some of their models quite quickly, i.e. within 2 or 3 months after the announcement, and they release some of their models not very quickly, within a year or two of the announcement. So this one isn't going to be released anytime soon, but it is nonetheless probably the most interesting of the models that they've announced so far this month, of the ones I've talked about, and that is an Air Belgium 747-8 freighter with an Austrian registration, but in these colours of Hongyuan Group, or I'm sure I didn't say that right, but you get the idea. And Hongyuan Group are a company, a Chinese company, that have partnered with Air Belgium and taken a stake in the airline. The airline still remains European based, but nonetheless it is kind of half and a half, if you like, and they still call it the Hongyuan 747-8F. So for me, this one is actually quite interesting, especially because you're putting together quite an interesting Hongyuan livery, or at least a colourful one, with a lovely Air Belgian tail. And I might be able to pass this one off as a Chinese airline, so I might be able to buy this one for my collection. And yeah, I'm quite looking forward to it. I like the 747-8 freighter mold of jcwings. I think they've actually modified the hump recently to make it better than it was, because that was the big criticism against it. It hasn't really stopped me buying it in the past, but it probably wasn't as good. It certainly wasn't as good as the Phoenix version, but I think they may have slightly modified it. I haven't looked in a lot of detail at some of the more recent releases, but I think they have. Anyway, this will be nice. This will be an attractive model when they eventually get it out, and I'm going to put this one up into Supersonic because it's the first model of this month's releases where I'm going, hey, that's actually unique and interesting and attractive. Sadly, my excitement doesn't continue on to the next model in the release set, which is a 757. It is in the colours of the Royal New Zealand Air Force, and the standard colours, that is. The reason I'm not excited isn't because of the subject material. Obviously, I just lived in New Zealand until recently, and that was cool. But this isn't the first time this has been made. And once again, this is an example, I think, of JC trying to compete with ngmodels, because NG released it and then jcwings released it quite close together. Can't be a coincidence. And there isn't really that much competition again, because these are both, just like the 747SP, this is the old Gemini mold, just slightly sexed up with new gears and aerials, but it doesn't really work as well. It certainly doesn't compete with the NG models version of this model, which was really, really nice. And if you wanted a New Zealand Air Force 757, you'd have almost certainly got one of the two versions that they released back then. Since then, JC, like I said, have released one New Zealand Air Force 757, the one wearing the 75th anniversary colours, and even though it looked fine, it's like 747, it looks fine until you compare it to the competition, and in this case, again, it's like that. So the only thing that I will say that's saving this from being gas guzzler is that the old Gemini 757 mold was actually quite decent, and the upgrades haven't been without some success. So it's still an okay mold. It's better certainly than the 747 SP. So for me, this one's going into workhorse. It's already been made before by NG, and it's going to be much better. The new version here is going to be fine, but nothing special. Why didn't you buy the NG version? So why would you buy this? I don't know. Workhorse. And the next model, you could kind of make the same argument for, though it's slightly different, because this one is an Air Canada 767-300, and it's wearing a special scheme. It's wearing this Free Spirit Experience Aboriginal Culture scheme, and this model has been made previously as well, though to be honest, looking at it, I thought it had been made before. Maybe it hasn't actually, not in this exact scheme, because this one looks like it's wearing the toothpaste tail on it. It's not got the classic 90s tail, which looks like the previous versions had, because Aero Classics and Dragonwings had made this before, wearing the classic tail from the 90s, the dark navy. I always think it looks kind of navy, the dark tail, and this one looks like it's wearing the toothpaste scheme from the 2000s, which, to be honest, I really didn't like that frosted scheme. Didn't like the colours, didn't like the way you could never work out what colour it was even. But yeah, I do like the jcwings 767 mould, but I've already got this model wearing the old scheme. I'm not going to be replacing. I've got the Dragonwings version, incidentally, which actually is pretty good. Dragon make a decent 767 when they did make 767s. I'm not going to replace it. And for me, this one, again, is going to go into workhorse territory. It's going to be a nice model, and maybe you're really super excited by it, but it's not really thrilling me because it's been made before and I've got a nice version already that's very, very similar to this. So this one's going to be just workhorse for me. So that just leaves two models that I haven't talked about so far, and both of these are 777s. And this is where the release set perhaps gets the most interesting from a mold perspective, because one of these is in the colours of Qatar Cargo. Now that's not interesting, I admit. Even if it's got a move by the people special scheme, it's still blah. But it is going to be an interactive Series 777, and there have been none up to this point in time. It is slightly annoying the way jcwings don't seem able to actually promote the fact they're releasing new molds, or just slip them out and kind of hope people will notice. But let's be fair, no one's seen a picture of this so far, because jcwings probably haven't even finished the mold yet. I know they were making one in 200 scale. I didn't realise they were making one in 400 scale too. I really like the interactive series. I know some people don't like them so much, but I have to admit that an interactive 777 is nowhere near as cool as an interactive 747, because you don't have the nose cargo door. But nonetheless, it's still going to be nice. It's still going to be interesting. I welcome more interactive molds personally. I'm not going to be getting Qatar Cargo because the colour scheme and even this special version of it is not very interesting, and it doesn't fit my criteria anyway, let's be honest. But it's exciting enough, and I'm interested enough to see what they do with this mold in the future, that I'm going to be putting this one up into High Flyer because of that new mold. I just wish the jcwings knew what they were doing about releasing molds. I'm not really sure what's going on at JC, to be honest. They seem to be doing a lot and not necessarily delivering that much, because they've got quite a few new molds under design, and yet they rarely release updates about them. They seem to have stopped talking to me about them, which is fine if they want to do that, but I wish they'd just promote the bloody things rather than expecting collectors to somehow find them somewhere. So it's a bit slapdash, their release schedule in terms of new molds and what they're doing and how long it takes them to do it. It took them ages to get their 747-400 out, for example. Hey, but that's the way they roll. It's none of my business, I guess. Doesn't stop this model or this mold from likely being High Flyer, because their base 777 is excellent. It would be supersonic if it was in a more interesting scheme, but it isn't, so it's just High Flyer. And that leads us on to the last model of the release set, which is a Boeing house colour scheme. JC do like a Boeing house colour scheme. This one is the Eco Demonstrator, a 777-200 ER N861 Bravo Charlie. This scheme looks wonderful. It's a really attractive livery. It's got these lovely blue shades. It's got the globe on the rear fuselage, wavy patterns, nice big titles. Even got some writing on the engines, which really complement the scheme. It looks really cool. So ally that with what is the best 777 on the market, in my opinion, and you're going to have a really nice model. The only downside is obviously that, again, this is another model that they haven't done yet, or haven't got production photos of yet, so who knows when it's going to get released. But if you ignore the fact that you might have to wait a year or two for it, it's going to be a really nice model, and I'm going to slap it up there in the supersonic alongside that 747A. So they both look like the best models for me this month. Okay, so that is it for this month's jcwings releases. In summary, there's a hell of a lot this month which is very similar to what JC's been doing previously. You've got 4 or 5 of these models which are effectively re-releases, just with some minor variation. That can be good if you've missed out on the model, not so good if you didn't. There's still some good stuff in there to be found. As you can see from my ratings here, a couple of these releases I think will be really interesting, and especially the 2 that I've got up here in supersonic. It's just a shame that those 2 and the interactive 777 freighter there are likely to be long waits. I don't think that that's ever going to change, and JC will always be the kind of manufacturer that produces some models relatively quickly and produces a lot of models a long time in the future. It would just be nice if you had a clearer view of when they were going to come out, and if JC was better at communicating exactly what they might look like. But, you know, this is the nature of JC Wings, and these are the releases this month. I think that there's some good stuff, but there's also a lot of workhorse here. So I'll be interested to hear what you guys think about the way JC releases, about this concept of producing multiple versions of effectively the same model with only minor differences. Yeah, it's an interesting one. But until next time, that's it from me. Keep on checking out yesterday's airlines. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.